I think we should start with something that's anything involving Trump. Obviously, is just top of the news for anything. And Trump has spoken a lot about the Panama Canal, as we've discussed both in articles and podcast form. And he recently sent Marco Rubio, little Marco, came on down to Panama to meet with Panama's president. The main topic being, of course, the canal and Trump's claims about China's undue influence. As we know, it's probably a lot of a negotiation going on as things go with Trump. But what do you think about Marco Rubio being expressly sent down to Panama to meet with the president?
Well, before we get into Marco's visit, let's just take one step back so we have a little bit of context, okay? I think that what Trump was doing is he was really marking his territory, okay? He came in on his inauguration speech. He mentioned Panama. It was quite interesting to have little old Panama, this tiny little country in the middle of Central South America, mentioned in the inauguration speech. But I think really what he's doing is he is marking his territory. So obviously, the borders of the U.S. are the Atlantic and the Pacific. And then he was saying, okay, we're going to take the Arctic. This is the rhetoric of Canada and Greenland. And then his borders, his southern borders, is not actually the Mexican wall that we're going to make them pay for. It's actually extends now all the way to Panama. So this is their sphere of influence. Now, I was out with someone for dinner the other day, and it was like, they're saying, oh, Trump's coming for you. I was like, what do you mean he's coming for me? He's like, no, he's coming for you specifically, Mikkel, because
For
you're a
Mikkel
Canadian.
Thorpe.
Yeah, but he's coming for Mikkel Thorpe. Because I am a Canadian. He's already gone for Canada. With Danish heritage, he wants to take Greenland, and now he wants to take the Panama Canal, which is like this is who I am. I'm Canadian, Danish, Panamanian down here. So I don't know how I got Trump's eye on all of these things. So it was very interesting that he called out Panama in all of this. We went and did a really fantastic article, a giant shout out to our research team and everybody at Expat Money who helped make this possible. But we went through it line by line on every single one of his statements. 36,000 Americans died during the building of the canal. And it's like, well, that's not exactly true at all. Actually, the people who died were not Americans. They were most likely Caribbeans or they were Panamanians. A lot of it happened while France was building the canal. That was a different time period. It was from Malaysia. So malaria, excuse me. So there was a very different set of circumstances. He says that the Chinese controlled the canal. It's like, well, not really the Chinese. This is a Hong Kong company who has a port on both sides, and they've been there since the 90s, and there's never been a problem. They were all approved, and they have no management of the canal whatsoever. What they have is a port. There's many ports here in Panama. There's American ports, Panamanian ports, all of them have influence on these types of things. So Marco Rubio comes down and, they have a sit-down meeting. He was here very, very briefly, but the outcome at the end was Molino, president of Panama, kind of stood up and said, well, these things are wrong, but, we recognize the value of the U.S. and you're right, we are friends and we will not be re-signing the Belt and Road Initiative contract in the future with China. So they're going to kind of let that one right off into the sunset. And now Panama is firmly back in U.S. sphere of influence, which I am totally fine with. I think that's no problem and it makes complete sense. My only pushback is that if Trump is marking his territory and his sphere of influence, then let's let Russia do the same. Let's let China do the same. Like, why is U.S. and Canadian Coast Guard going up and down the Taiwan Strait? That makes no sense whatsoever. Do you want Chinese Coast Guard, going up and down the Gulf of Mexico? It doesn't, or Gulf of America. Like, it doesn't. None of this makes any sense.
Thank you for the correction.
Yes, exactly. So I'm not sure which one. Another quick side note, I had clients and friends and people like that send me screenshots from where they are in the world of Google Earth. And if you're inside the US, it's called the Gulf of America. But if you're in Europe or in Australia or something, it's still called the Gulf of Mexico. So I think Google themselves is trolling Trump, on all of this stuff. So anyways, if the U.S. is going to have a sphere of influence, then at least allow other countries to have their sphere of influence. Don't be putting missile batteries and radar stations right up on their door. They don't like that. You wouldn't like it either. But, hopefully Trump follows through on his rhetoric of de-escalating things and peace. And I want him to be the president of peace. I will close one eye on so many other things if he can end these senseless wars. I am always on the side of peace through and through and through. full stop, period.
Well, we will dig into the efforts to end the Ukraine war in a second. I want to stay on this canal issue for a minute. So, we talked about a lot of Trump's claims. Many people will just say Trump is a buffoon and tells big lies or what have you. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But either way, I think the claims he's making on the surface are not necessarily what drives his end goal. What do you think is his real sort of bigger picture mission with this rhetoric towards Panama, with sending Marco down there? What do you think Trump really wants to get out of all this?
Well, as I said, I do think that he's marking his territory. I think that this is going to be the new sphere of influence. He's bringing everything back home. Now, do I think he's actually going to send the military down here or take it by force? No, not at all. I think he's just shooting off his mouth. But I can imagine him doing the same thing as a real estate developer in New York and going around and looking at a piece of land and being like, this is shit and your neighbors suck and the permitting for this is going to be a nightmare and the view here is blocked by these assholes and blah, 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 blah. And then just throwing stones at everything around him to try to renegotiate and push the price as low as possible is really what he's done. He's made these huge claims. He went out there, he trash bagged Panama, he said all these nasty things, and then he comes down here, everybody's on edge, everybody's really nervous and they're worried about all these things, and then he gets what he wants, and then the Panamanians and everybody else is like, whew, phew, it's over and we survived and we made it through. So I don't think we're going to be hearing too much more about it. I think that Molino understands the gravity of the situation. He also came forward and said that he will help on the deportation of a lot of illegal immigrants in the United States and that Panama would take them and that Panama will not be paying for anything because he's very much, not into spending government funds on these things. But they will be able to assist. They want to close the border. We can thank Soros and a lot of other, unscrupulous people who kind of opened up the Darien Gap and was shuttling people through. I think that is going to slow down or hopefully stop completely. And but I'm not too worried about anything going much further than this. I think Panama is in check and it should be all right.
Well, our good friend Tom Luongo, I'm not sure if he coined the term or not, but I've heard him refer to this as the Don Roe doctrine, sort of Trump's idea to be refocusing the American empire. Whether we like that there's an American sort of a large superpower like the U.S. and China and Russia or not, these things are reality. And the truth is much of the world is going to be influenced by some of these powers one way or another. And Trump seems to want to be focusing, as you said, on more of the United States backyard than on traipsing all around the world.